So I'm dealing with some repercussions from a hurricane that hit my area about 2 weeks ago. So you all get another week of just a voice recording. But getting into the question for this week, code reviews are an integral part of our work as developers. They are critical to having solid, reliable code and also keeping up with best practices. There are tons of different benefits to having code reviews. We've all written bad code. That's just a matter of time if we haven't done it so far. It's just going to happen. Everyone makes mistakes, and that happens when we write code as well. And so having a coworker there to help catch any mistakes that we might make ensures that we're giving our clients the best experience possible, which should be our goal throughout the whole process of developing, upkeeping a website, fixing different things, all of that. We need to be focused on giving our clients the best experience that we can, doing the best that we can with the jobs that we are given. But before we go over the question, as always, check out the resources that we have available at SwiftOtter.com and reach out to us if you have any questions or thoughts. Let's review the question. So you are reviewing a pull request for a coworker's new module and see the following snippet in a class. And so we got just a basic try-catch block. Looks like we're looping over some bank accounts to grab some data for that, and then just catching or returning an error message if there is a problem. And so the question is, what change or changes do you request before approving the work to be merged? And so we have these three options. Option A, replace the foreach loop with array map. B, switch sprintf to the double underscore interpretation function. Or C, use the try-catch block inside the foreach loop to catch individual exceptions. So, which of these changes are we going to request? It could be multiple of them for this bit of code that we have. Now, two important things to be aware of are ways to improve the readability and conciseness of the code, and also we need to be aware of lesser used portions of the code that may not have been tested as thoroughly by the developer that wrote it. Obviously, as we're writing code, there are going to be times when we kind of skimp on different areas that may need to be tested, and especially for some of these different logging instances, we're typically not going to tend to spend as much time making sure that messages are logged as we expect they would be, as we are going to be testing the actual functionality for the code that we're writing. So it's just something to be aware of. Portions of the code that may not have been tested as thoroughly. Just kind of keep an eye out for that and be aware of different things that can slip in, which we're going to see in just a second. Because if we look at this, code snippet, in the for each section, because we have what looks to be a relatively small array and definitely what would end up being an extremely simple callback function, option A would be a good recommendation. Due to that being a smaller array, a very basic callback, switching to array map would be a way that we could make the code more concise. Cut out a few lines of code, make it more readable and clear. And now I'm not making a blanket statement with this. It's important to note that in scenarios where there is maybe a huge array or a very complex callback function that would be required, there are some performance concerns and definitely readability can be impacted. So it's not a blanket statement. This is not something across the board we're just going to want to be throwing array map around. But in this instance, again, because of the smaller array, basic callback, we can recommend putting array map in there in place of that for each to get more concise, clean code. Now for option B, to review that, switching the sprintf function to the double underscore, looking at the code snippet here, we actually end up having we have an incorrect placeholder here. For this to work, we're going to need to switch that %1 to %s. That's going to be the bare minimum. However, one thing that we can recommend to improve localization is just switching it to the double underscore function. Leave that %1 placeholder as is. That's going to work correctly if we just switch that sprintf out for the double underscores. Again, that's going to improve the localization there and fix what would ultimately come down to this log message not working as intended. That placeholder is not going to work. That customer ID is not going to be available. And obviously, down the line, if there is a problem, that is going to make it harder to debug. Lastly, option C, using a try-catch block inside the foreach loop to catch the individual exceptions. We look at this again, obviously we have the whole thing wrapped in a try-catch block, and in this scenario, adding a try-catch inside of that foreach is just going to be unnecessary complexity. It's not going to add really any value, it's not needed, and really it's better in this case for any exceptions to be handled for the whole process. So with that being the case, since option A is going to make the code more concise, and option B is going to ensure that logging works correctly, as well as it's going to improve the localization aspect, I'm going to be selecting options A and B as the correct answers. Those are going to be recommendations that'll be beneficial to make to the coworker that we are reviewing their code for. And again, definitely in ranking priority for this, option B is going to be critical. We don't want to have to deal with code that is harder to debug down the road. I've dealt with some different issues actually recently where logging was critical to tracking down some of the problems that I was working through. So when we run these different scenarios, when we add some logging, we want to make sure that later on down the road, we're not wanting to kick ourselves for not adding the logging that was necessary or not ensuring that it was set up in a way that was going to work correctly. So options A and B are correct. If you have any thoughts or maybe a different opinion, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching.